I stared at the bank statement on my laptop screen, my fingers numb on the keyboard. There it was, the number that would change everything. $42,000. Gone. Transferred to a name I didn't recognize, just 3 weeks after Derek and I had finally paid off our apartment here in Anchorage. My vision blurred for a second. I had to read it twice to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. That was the moment I realized my mother-in-law wasn't just going to ask for money. She was going to take it. Let me back up. 3 years ago, I met Derek at Providence, Alaska Medical Center, where I work as a medical registrar. He'd come in for a minor procedure, torn rotator cuff from a construction accident, and somehow we ended up talking for 40 minutes after his appointment was supposed to be over. He was funny in a quiet way, had this crooked smile that made the other nurses tease me for weeks. By the time he left the clinic, he'd asked for my number 3 times. I said yes on the 3rd try. Derek worked in the oil industry, doing contract work at remote sites up north. The schedule was brutal, 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, but the money was solid, really solid. We both had good jobs, no kids, no baggage. For the first year, everything felt easy. He'd come back from his rotations with stories about the midnight sun and terrible camp food, and I'd have the apartment cleaned and dinner waiting. We'd spend his 2 weeks off completely wrapped up in each other, driving up the Seward Highway, hiking in the Chugach Mountains, just being young and in love in a place that felt like the edge of the world. When we got married 2 years ago, it was small and simple, just immediate family at a little church in downtown Anchorage. Derek's mother, Linda, was there, a woman I'd met maybe 5 times before the wedding. She was polite enough, always smiling, always asking about my job in that curious, tilted head way that made me feel like she was taking notes. Derek's father had passed when Derek was 12, so it was just Linda and Derek's younger sister, Natalie, who lives in Seattle. We bought the apartment last year, a 1-bedroom in Midtown, nothing fancy, but it was ours. The market was brutal. Prices are insane in Anchorage, and we'd saved like crazy. Every paycheck, Derek and I would move money into the down payment fund. We were going to be mortgage-free by 40. That was the plan. That was the dream that kept us grinding through the long winters and the endless work rotations. And by this summer, we'd actually done it. 3 months ago, in June, we made the final payment. I remember standing in the kitchen, Derek holding up the official letter from the bank, both of us crying a little. We owned our home outright, no debt, no strings, just us and 4 walls that were completely, entirely ours. That feeling lasted exactly 92 days. Derek's sister Natalie called on a Tuesday evening. I could hear something wrong in her voice immediately, a tightness, like she was holding her breath. "Is Derek there?" she asked. "He's in the shower. Is everything okay?" There was a pause. "Can you just have him call me back? It's about Mom." When Derek called her back 20 minutes later, I could tell from his face that something had shifted. He went into the bedroom and closed the door, but the apartment is small. I heard fragments through the walls. "What do you mean she didn't tell me? And how long has this been going on?" And finally, very quietly, "I don't know what I can do about it, Nat." When he came back out, he looked like someone had punched him in the stomach. "My mom's having financial problems," he said, sitting down heavily on the couch. "Apparently pretty serious ones. She's been behind on her mortgage in Seattle for months. Natalie's been helping her, but Nat's got her own family to think about, and Mom won't admit how bad it is. Natalie thinks she's about to lose the house." I felt something cold slide into my chest. "How much are we talking?" "I don't know yet. Mom won't return her calls. Natalie's just worried." Over the next week, we got the full picture. Linda had bought a house in the suburbs of Seattle on a variable rate mortgage back in 2008. For years, the payments were manageable, but as her part-time receptionist job barely covered living expenses and the interest rates climbed, she'd fallen behind. Not just a month or 2, we're talking 6 months of missed payments. The bank was already making noise about foreclosure. The amount she owed to catch up? $28,000, just to avoid losing the house. Derek called me from work one afternoon. I was between appointments, sitting in my small office, filing patient insurance claims. "My mom called," he said. His voice sounded hollow. "She wants to know if we can help." "Help how?" She's asking if we can lend her the money." The words just sat there between us like something dead on the road. "Derek, we just paid off our apartment. We don't have $28,000 sitting around." "I know." I told her that. But she's really upset. She says she's going to lose everything. She asked if maybe we could take out a loan or something, just to help her get back on her feet. I remember standing up from my desk, walking to the small window in my office. Outside, it was July, and Anchorage was green and bright, almost unreal in its perfection. "We're not doing that," I said quietly. "Derek, we worked so hard. We sacrificed for 3 years." "I know, baby. I'm not saying we should. I'm just telling you what she said." But I could hear something in his voice. Guilt. The kind of guilt that doesn't go away just because you know you're right. That weekend, Derek's mom called. She asked if she could visit. She arrived on a Friday evening in early August, flying down from Seattle. Derek picked her up from the airport, and I made dinner. Salmon, roasted vegetables, a salad. I was trying to be warm, to show that I wasn't the bad guy in this scenario, even though I had a feeling I was about to be cast exactly that way. Linda looked smaller than I remembered. Her hair had more gray in it. She was wearing a cardigan even though it was 75 degrees outside, and she kept wrapping her arms around herself like she was cold. "The apartment looks wonderful," she said, looking around our little living room. "You've really made it lovely." "Thank you," I said. "Can I get you something to drink?" After dinner, Derek went to take a shower, and Linda and I were alone in the kitchen. She was helping me load the dishwasher, moving slowly, carefully, like each plate required great consideration. "I want to thank you for having me," she said. "I know this is complicated." "It is," I said, not unkindly. "Derek told me about your situation. I'm sorry you're going through this." "I've made some poor choices," she said, and something in her tone made me look at her. She was smiling, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I was wondering, have you and Derek thought any more about what we discussed?" "Linda, we can't." "I'm not asking you to give it to me," she interrupted very gently. "I'm asking if you could lend it to me. I'll pay you back. I promise I will. It might take time, but I will." I closed the dishwasher. "I understand, but we just paid off our home. We want to keep it that way." She nodded slowly, setting down the last plate. "You've paid off your apartment. Now it's time to help cover your sister-in-law's future. That's what family does." The words were so smooth, so reasonable sounding, that it took me a moment to realize what she'd actually said. She'd reframed the entire thing. Paid off apartment equals obligation to her. It wasn't a request anymore. It was a statement of how things should be. I didn't respond. I just turned away and started wiping down the counter. But later that night, after Linda had gone to bed in our guest room, Derek held me in the dark and asked if we could maybe think about it. Just think about it. And I felt something shift in the foundation of everything we'd built. That was the first warning sign, the moment when I should have recognized the pattern starting to form. The moment when I should have understood that Linda's polite smile and gentle voice were far more dangerous than any outright demand could ever be. That night, I lay awake in the dark, listening to Derek's breathing beside me. He'd fallen asleep quickly, but I couldn't shut my mind off. Linda's words kept circling back. "Now it's time to help cover your sister-in-law's future. That's what family does." The reframing had been so smooth, so calculated, that I wondered if she'd rehearsed it. Over the next 2 weeks, the pressure didn't ease. It intensified. Derek would bring it up casually at first. "Mom called again. She's really worried about the timeline. The bank said they might start foreclosure proceedings in October if she doesn't catch up." Then, later in the week, Natalie texted, "Mom's not sleeping. Natalie thinks she's depressed." And finally, the one that made my stomach drop. My mom asked if we could at least think about taking out a home equity line of credit, just to help her through this rough patch. A home equity line of credit. On the apartment we just paid off. "No," I said flatly. We were in the kitchen, and I was making coffee before my shift. "Derek, absolutely not." "I'm not saying we should. I'm just telling you what she said." "You're considering it." I could hear it in his voice, that guilty hesitation. You're actually considering putting our home at risk." "It wouldn't be at risk. We'd pay it back. She'd pay us back." "Would she?" I turned to face him. "Derek, your mother has been irresponsible with money her entire life. You've told me that. She's been behind on her mortgage for 6 months and didn't tell anyone until Natalie found out. How is that the financial behavior of someone we should loan $28,000 to?" He flinched. "She's still my mother." "I know she is, and I'm sorry she's struggling, but we're not responsible for fixing her choices." He left for work without saying goodbye. He was heading back to his site up north that afternoon for a 2-week rotation, and we didn't resolve it. That became the pattern. He'd mention his mother's situation, I'd refuse, he'd leave angry or hurt, and then I'd spend the next 2 weeks alone in the apartment, stewing in the unfairness of it all. September came. Derek came home from his rotation looking exhausted, thinner somehow, like the weight of it all was eating him alive. We had sex once, mechanically, and it felt like the saddest thing that had ever happened between us. Afterward, he held me, but I could feel the distance. He was somewhere else. "My mom's really struggling," he said in the dark. "Natalie's been covering her mortgage payment, but Nat can't keep doing it. She's got her own mortgage, her kids' school costs. It's too much." "Then your mother needs to call a financial advisor or a credit counselor," I said quietly. "Or she needs to sell the house and downsize." "She loves that house. It's been her home for 15 years. "I know, but loving it doesn't mean she can afford it." He didn't respond. He just turned away and lay there, and I knew we were fracturing. The Derek I'd married, the one who was on my team, who made decisions together with me, was disappearing. In his place was someone caught between loyalty to his mother and commitment to me, and he was choosing his mother. By the time October rolled around, I was barely sleeping. At work, I'd space out during patient appointments, asking people to repeat themselves. My coworker Veronica, who sat 2 desks over, noticed. She'd been working at Providence for 5 years, and we'd gotten close enough that she knew the outlines of my life. "You okay?" she asked one afternoon, handing me a coffee. "You look like you haven't slept in a week." I almost didn't tell her, but I was so tired of carrying it alone. "My mother-in-law is in financial trouble, and my husband thinks we should loan her money, a lot of money. Money we don't have without taking on debt." Veronica set down her own coffee and looked at me directly. "How much money?" $28,000. She whistled low. "And you said no." I said no. "Good. Don't change your mind." She pulled her chair closer to my desk. "Listen, my sister-in-law did something similar. Not the same amount, but close. She and her husband had paid off their house, and my brother wanted to help his mother with a business loan. They did it. Took out a second mortgage, the works." "What happened?" "The mother never paid them back. Not a penny. She had some excuse every time they asked. Money was tight. The business wasn't doing as well as expected. She'd pay them next month. That was 8 years ago. My brother and his wife are still paying off the debt. They're not even talking anymore." I felt something crystallize in my chest. How is that possible? How do you just not pay back your child? "Because people are selfish," Veronica said simply, "and because if you ask your kid for money and they give it to you, something shifts in the relationship. You start resenting them for having what you don't have. You start feeling like they owe you. The debt becomes a weapon." That night, I did something I'd been avoiding. I looked at our bank account, actually really looked at it. Derek had his checking account, I had mine, but we also had a joint account where we combined money for shared expenses, mortgage, utilities, groceries, things like that. The joint account had $62,000 in it. My breath caught. We'd been saving aggressively since we paid off the apartment. Both of us had good jobs. Derek made substantially more than I did with his contract work, and we had no debt, no major expenses beyond living costs. The money had just been accumulating. $62,000 that Derek could theoretically access without my permission. I called the bank the next morning from my office during my lunch break. I told them I needed to put a hold on any large transfers from the joint account without both signatures. The representative explained the process, and it took about 20 minutes to set it up. I felt sick the whole time. That night, I told Derek what I'd done. We were in the living room. He was on his laptop doing something for work, and I sat down on the couch and said, very calmly, I put a freeze on the joint account. No transfers over $500 without both of our signatures. He went very still. Why would you do that? His voice was quiet, dangerous in a way I'd never heard before. Because I don't trust that you won't use that money to help your mother. I would never do that without talking to you. Would you? I met his eyes. Because from where I'm sitting, you're spending every conversation trying to convince me that we should help her. You're upset with me for saying no. You're pulling away from me. And now you're about to have 2 weeks off, which means 2 weeks of her probably calling you, texting you, making you feel guilty. So you're controlling the money now. That's what this is. I'm protecting our future, our home. He stood up and left the room. He went into the bedroom and closed the door, and I sat there on the couch, shaking. The 2 weeks of his time off were brutal. Linda called almost every day. She'd ask to speak to Derek, and he'd go into the bedroom or take the phone outside. I couldn't hear the conversations, but I could read his face when he came back. Guilty, stressed, torn. On day 9 of his rotation at home, he said something that changed everything. We were making dinner together, a routine we'd started to salvage our relationship, cooking side by side in the small kitchen. He was chopping vegetables, and I was at the stove. What if we could help her without it being a loan? He said quietly. What if we just gave her the money? No expectation of repayment. We can afford it. I turned to look at him. Are you serious right now? We have the money. We don't need it. My mother is about to lose her home. Derek, we need that money. We need it for emergencies. We need it for our future, for children if we decide to have them, for medical bills, for car repairs, for anything that could go wrong. Nothing's going to go wrong. You don't know that. I turned off the stove. And more importantly, I won't agree to just give away $28,000. I won't. That's not a discussion we're having. He set down the knife. Then I guess I'm going to do it anyway. The words landed like a punch. What? My name is on that account too. Yes, you put a freeze on large transfers, but I can still petition the bank to remove it. I can say I'm being financially controlled, which I am, and they'll likely reverse it. My hands were shaking. Derek, don't do this. I have to. He looked away. I can't just let my mother lose everything. I won't be able to live with myself. And you can live with yourself stealing from our marriage? It's not stealing. It's our money. It's a decision we make together, and you're deciding unilaterally. That's stealing from me, from us. He didn't respond. He just left the kitchen, left the apartment, and didn't come back until late that night. When he did, he'd been drinking. I could smell it on him as he moved past me to the bedroom. The next morning, I called a lawyer. Her name was Rachel Chen, and her office was in a building downtown near the courthouse. I'd found her through a family law referral service, and when I sat across from her desk and explained the situation, she listened without interrupting, taking notes in a leather-bound pad. Has he actually transferred the money yet? She asked when I finished. No, he threatened to, but he hasn't. Okay, that's important. Right now, you have options. She leaned back in her chair. First, I'd recommend opening your own separate account immediately. Move half of whatever is in the joint account into an account with only your name on it. That's your protection. Can I do that? You can. It's legal. You have equal access to joint funds, and you can move your half. The key word is your half. Don't take more than 50%. I nodded, writing this down on the notepad she'd given me. Second, I'd recommend we have a conversation about a postnuptial agreement. It's like a prenup, but for people already married. It clarifies what happens to assets if things go south, and it can also establish financial boundaries. You think things will go south? She didn't answer directly. I think you're concerned enough to call a lawyer, which tells me something important is broken. Whether it can be fixed depends on whether your husband is willing to acknowledge that and work on it. After I left her office, I sat in my car for 20 minutes before I could drive. The idea that I was now consulting with a divorce attorney felt surreal. We'd been married 2 years. 2 years. We'd been together for 3. We'd just paid off our home. That evening, when Derek came home from meeting with Natalie, "They've gotten coffee," he said, though he reeked of guilt. I told him we needed to talk. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one where we'd signed the final papers on our apartment 3 months ago. "I want you to know that I love you," I started. "I do. But I'm scared. I'm scared that you're choosing your mother over me, and I'm scared of what that means for us." "I'm not choosing her over you. I'm trying to help her. At the cost of our marriage." He flinched. "I went to see a lawyer today," I continued. "Her name is Rachel Chen, and she told me about postnuptial agreements and financial protection. I'm telling you this because I want you to understand how serious this is. I'm not joking anymore. I'm protecting myself." Derek's face went pale. "You're talking about divorce. I'm talking about protecting my future. There's a difference. But if you take that money without my agreement, if you go behind my back and drain our joint account to help your mother, then yes, we might be headed for divorce. Because I can't be married to someone I can't trust." He stood up and walked to the window. For a long time he didn't speak. When he finally did, his voice was hollow. "I don't know what to do anymore. I feel like I'm losing everyone. My mother's about to lose her house. Natalie's angry at me for not helping more. And now you're threatening to leave me if I don't just let my mother suffer." "I'm not threatening to leave you. I'm telling you that there are consequences. I'm telling you that there are consequences to financial infidelity. And right now, you're about to cross a line that I don't think we can come back from." He turned away from me and walked out of the apartment. He didn't come back that night. The next morning, my phone rang. It was the bank. A representative informed me that Derek had called them at 8 a.m. and requested that the freeze on the joint account be lifted. He'd claimed that I was financially controlling him and that he needed access to the funds. The bank said they'd reviewed the request and determined that because we were both account holders with equal rights, they could remove the freeze, but only if both of us consented in writing or if he obtained a court order. "He's angry that he can't access the money," the representative said, her voice carefully neutral. "He's asked us to send him the court order paperwork. I wanted to give you a heads up." After I hung up, I sat in my home office with my laptop open, staring at nothing. Derek was going to take me to court over money. My husband was going to take me to court. I called Rachel Chen's office and got an emergency appointment for 2 days later. When I walked in, she took one look at my face and didn't bother with small talk. "He's filed for a court order," I told her, "to access the joint account." She nodded like she'd been expecting this. "Okay, that's actually workable. What we need to do is get ahead of this. I'm going to recommend we move forward with the postnuptial agreement immediately, and we're also going to document everything, every threat, every conversation about taking the money. Do you have those texts?" "Some of them. Forward them all to me, everything. And I'm going to need you to think very carefully about whether this marriage is still something you want to save." I felt my throat tighten. "I don't know." "Then we prepare for both scenarios," she said simply. "We protect your assets as if a divorce is imminent, and simultaneously, we make one final attempt at saving the marriage. But I'm going to be honest with you. A man who's willing to take his wife to court over money, who's willing to involve lawyers and judges in a private financial dispute, is a man who's already made his choice about where his loyalty lies." Over the next week, I documented everything. Every text message where Derek mentioned his mother's financial situation. Every conversation where he'd pushed me to help. I created a timeline, printed out the bank statements, and organized it all in a folder that I gave to Rachel. Meanwhile, Derek and I barely spoke. He was sleeping in the guest room. We'd pass each other in the kitchen in the mornings, and he'd look at me with such anger and hurt that it felt like a knife turning in my chest. But I didn't back down. I couldn't. Then, 3 days before the court hearing, I got a call from Natalie. "Hey," she said, her voice tight, "I need to talk to you about something, not as Derek's sister, as someone who's known what's been happening." "Okay," I said cautiously. "I need to tell you the truth about my mom," she said. "The real truth, not the version Derek's been telling you." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" My mom didn't accidentally fall behind on her mortgage, Natalie said. She's been managing her money irresponsibly for years. I've been covering her shortfalls because I felt obligated, but I finally got tired of it 6 months ago. I told her she needed to figure it out herself. That's when she called Derek. Okay, but here's the thing, Natalie interrupted. I looked at her finances more carefully. She's not underwater. She's got investments, a retirement account, savings. She could pay off her mortgage arrears right now if she liquidated some of those assets. She's choosing not to because she wants to keep that money for herself. She called Derek, hoping he'd bail her out so she wouldn't have to touch her own savings. I couldn't speak. There's more, Natalie continued. Derek doesn't know this, but I hired a financial advisor to review my mom's situation, and the advisor confirmed it. My mom has enough money to fix this problem. She's just never had to be responsible for her own choices because someone always bails her out. First my dad, then me, and now she's trying to manipulate Derek into doing it. Why are you telling me this? Because I love my brother, but I'm furious with him for not asking questions, and I think you deserve to know what you're actually dealing with. My mom isn't a victim, she's a manipulator, and Derek's about to destroy his marriage because he can't see it. After we hung up, I sat in my car in the parking lot at work for an hour. Then I called Rachel and told her to add this information to the case file. I asked her to get Natalie's statement in writing. The night before the court hearing, Derek came into the bedroom where I was reading. He looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept properly in weeks. I don't want to do this, he said quietly. Then don't, I replied. Drop the court case. Accept the freeze on the account. Go to marriage counseling with me. Let's try to fix this. My mom's going to lose her house. No, she's not. That's what I need to tell you. I set down my book. I talked to Natalie. Your mother has enough money to cover her mortgage arrears. She's choosing not to use it because she'd rather guilt you into giving her money instead. His face went very still. Natalie's not being truthful, he said, but there was no conviction in his voice. She's giving me a written statement. She's willing to testify if we go to court. And Derek, I hired a financial advisor too. I had them review the same information. It's true. Your mother can fix this herself. She just doesn't want to. I watched the realization move across his face like a shadow. The denial, then the anger, then something that looked like grief. I need to talk to her, he said finally. Okay, but I'm not giving her money, and I'm not going to apologize for protecting our home. He left the room without responding. The next morning, he didn't go to the court hearing. Instead, he called the court and withdrew his petition. The freeze on the account remained in place. That afternoon, I got a text from Linda. Just 3 words. You've poisoned him. Derek didn't speak to me for 3 days. Then, on a Thursday evening, he came home early from work and said we needed to talk. We sat in the living room, and he told me that he'd called his mother and asked her directly about her financial situation. He'd asked her if she had savings she could use. For a long time, Linda hadn't answered. Then she'd admitted that yes, she had money, but she'd been hoping that Derek would help her because that's what family does. I told her that family doesn't manipulate each other, Derek said quietly, and that I wasn't going to enable her financial irresponsibility anymore. I told her I loved her, but I was done. He looked at me with eyes that were red-rimmed and exhausted. I'm sorry, he said, for pushing you, for threatening to go behind your back, for choosing her over us. You were right, about all of it. I didn't rush to forgive him. I couldn't just pretend the last 2 months hadn't happened, but I did agree to marriage counseling. We started seeing someone 2 weeks later, a therapist named Dr. Patricia Morrison, who specialized in financial trauma and boundary issues in relationships. In our first session, Derek broke down, talking about his guilt over his father's death when he was 12, how he'd felt like he needed to take care of his mother after that, how he'd never learned to say no to her because he was afraid of abandoning her the way his father had. But I was abandoning my wife instead, he said, tears streaming down his face. Over the next 3 months, we rebuilt. Slowly. It wasn't linear. There were setbacks and arguments and nights where I wasn't sure we'd make it. But Derek did the work. He went to therapy, He set boundaries with his mother, and he recommitted to our partnership. Linda never apologized. She never acknowledged what she'd done, but she also never asked for money again. The last I heard from Natalie, Linda had sold some investments and paid off her mortgage arrears. She kept the house. As for Derek and me, we're still here. We're still in the apartment we paid off together. We have a post-nuptial agreement now, which feels strange and sad but also necessary.
We're talking about kids again, something we'd stopped discussing during the worst of it. And I learned something that I wish I hadn't had to learn. Sometimes the person you love most can hurt you the deepest, not out of malice, but out of blindness, out of loyalty to a story they've been telling themselves about who they need to be. I made the right call protecting our money, but the real victory wasn't financial. It was watching Derek finally see his mother clearly. It was him choosing me, choosing us. Even after everything, that still means something.